Okay, so as you guys are kind of getting your materials out and ready, I want you to find wherever chapter 5 came to a stop, and I want you to get to the next clean page, and let's go ahead and start chapter 6. If you're running a little bit low on pages, that could be happening. You have options. We don't use the religion section too much because we don't take a lot of notes on paper in religion. So you can go ahead and use some parts of that section for math. Or you may have to get yourself a new notebook. It's totally up to you, okay? But for today, we are going to move into the first thing in chapter 6, which is titled Adding Fractions with Unlike, which is code for different denominators, okay? Now, hopefully you're noticing that there's no lesson label on this. Like you don't have, Miss Malone doesn't have lesson 6.1. And that's because this is not lesson 6.1. This is lesson 6.2. We are skipping some of these lessons in here because some of these lessons are wasted space. You need to be taught how to add fractions that don't have like denominators, and you need to be taught how to add mixed numbers. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to learn how to do that. Some of those lessons in this chapter take up space, and we're not going to do them, okay? The other thing you're probably going to see, Mason, are you writing this down? Effort. I need to see the effort. The other thing that you are probably noticing is that this looks like stuff that you, Miss Malone, you've already taught us, and that is true. When we do this here in just a few minutes, you're going to notice that this chapter, you already kind of know how to do. All that stuff we just worked so hard for in chapter 5, we pretty much are going to be using in chapter 6. So the information is really not going to be that new, which is pretty good to know. And that's also the reason why we're going to knock out this chapter in about a week, okay? Because most of it you do already know how to do, okay? So steps to success. If you're one of those people who likes to kind of have your menu, have your like list of do this, do this, do this to help you to get to the finish line the best way, these are your steps. But step number 1 says you have to find the LCD. So obviously you won't be able to do that if you don't know what LCD is. Chapter 5 taught us that. So what is LCD? Tessa, what's LCD?
Least common denominator.
Least common denominator. Now I want to show you something, okay? Because this is a place where many mistakes were made on this test you guys just took yesterday. I still have people in this room confusing least common denominator and greatest common factor. I still have people getting those titles confused. So when I started teaching you this chapter, or last chapter, the thing I tried so hard to do was to get you guys to like connect words into your brain with things that your brain already knows. So for example, greatest common factor, the word factor, what I was wanting is for your brain to connect the word factor with things like multiplication facts. They're called multiplication facts because we use them when we're finding the greatest common factor, okay? But if we're finding least common denominator, do we use greatest common factor to do that?
No.
They're two totally different things. It's like hamburgers and tacos. They don't go together. We don't use them together. So least common denominator should go with least common multiple. And your brain should hear the word multiple and tell you to list the multiples. That's what I was hoping happened. But when you work through things in that test yesterday, some of you still are using factors for multiples. And that has to change. I can't change that. I taught you it, and that's the most I can do. I can't come over and be like drilling it into your brain. You have to get it. You got to like associate it. You have to make that connection in your own mind. So as we move into this new chapter, and it asks us to find the least common denominator, your brain should associate least common denominator with least common multiple. So if it's asking you to find the least common denominator, you will have to list the what? Multiples. Okay? And that's what step 1 says to do. So we got to make sure we understand that. Step 2 says to divide denominators of the old and the new fractions. So some of you are with me, some of you are not. You're staring into space. Space won't teach you this stuff. And then the final step to success simply says to multiply that number to the numerator to get your new numerator. Okay? So this is the word form. This is like the menu. This is the recipe to help you to add fractions that don't have matching denominators. So now we have to kind of use that and learn from it. Okay? Did you all have the steps down? Okay. If you don't have them, I'm going to give you another quick 30 seconds and then we're moving on. Okay? Go ahead and abbreviate things. What, babe? Numerator. Sorry, I ran out of space. I just abbreviated it. You can abbreviate things, shorten things up as long as you know what they mean. That's all that really matters. Okay? All right. So let's check out the one listed below that is going to kind of help us to walk through solving this. And most of you are probably sitting there right now and you're like, we just did this in chapter 5. When you were taught how to order fractions, do you remember those steps we took to put fractions in order? That's the same thing that you're doing here. Okay? So let's check this out real quick. Okay, let me hide this so it's not in the way. All right, so the example that we're looking at here is 2 6 plus 3 4. So what does step 1, Brody, say to do?
Find the least common denominator.
Okay, so our brains think at least common denominator means I need to find the multiples. I gotta list the multiples, right? So I gotta look at 6, I gotta look at 4, and I have to ask myself, what's the least common denominator between 6 and 4? So that means if I'm thinking of the multiples for 6, remember multiples mean that you're doubling the number, okay? 6, 12, 18, 24, okay? And I list the multiples of 4, doubling that number, 4, 8, 12, 16. Then what would be the first multiple that would connect with each other? Yes, 12, beautiful. How many of you saw it, got it, knew it? Did you have to list the multiples to find it? Did you kind of list the multiples in your brain to find it? That's cool, yeah. But remember, don't make your brain do too much work. That was the other thing that I noticed is that yesterday the mistakes that happened on some of our tests were mistakes that happened because we tried to do too much up top. If you would have just done it on paper, you probably wouldn't have had that error. Okay. All right, so step 1 says to find the least common denominator. Did we find it? Yes, it is 12. So what does step 2 say to do? What does it say to do? Come on, just tell me. Okay. So now I'm going to start building my new denominators with that 12 that you found. Okay. So again, this isn't new stuff, right? You're like, hey, we've already learned how to do this. I kind of know what's going on. Okay. So it says to divide the old and the new denominators. 12 is my new denominator. 4 was my old one. When I divide those, what do I get? I get a 3. But I'm not done. I can't put that there yet. I've got step 3 to do, don't I? So let's go ahead and divide this side. 12 divided by 6 is 2. Okay. Now I'm on to step 3. Step 3 says take that number and multiply it to make your new numerator. So the number that I got was a 3. If I multiply it by the numerator, what will I get to be my new numerator? 9. Do the same over here. What will I get? 4. So this is what you did when you ordered fractions, isn't it? So at this point, you would have, if you were ordering fractions, you would just like look and see which numerator was bigger, which one was smaller, and you'd be done, right? So the only thing different now, we're not putting things in order, but what are we doing? We're adding. So now all we have to do is add 4 and 9. What is 4 plus 9?
13.
13. Now, do we add the denominator?
No.
Say this. No, we do not. We worked so hard to just find the new denominator that matched, we're not going to mess it up. So 12 remains a 12.
And then we make a mix up.
Yes. But can I leave 13 over 12 as my final total answer? No, because as James just recognized, 13 over 12 is what kind of fraction, James?
Improper.
It's an improper fraction. And improper fractions cannot be left improper. They have to be simplified. So hopefully you remember from what we learned in chapter 5 on how to simplify an improper fraction. How do we, Dominic, simplify an improper fraction?
Well, you divide, you basically did, okay, so you divide 12 by 13, put it in your division level,
Okay.
and 12 can only go into 13 one time, so you can do 12 minus 13.
All right, so hang on just a second. So he said it's an improper fraction. I have to set it up as a division problem. Now, some of you are doing this in your head, and that's A-okay. But for those people who are visual and you want to see it so that you know you don't make any mistakes, this is how you would set it up. The top number goes in your box. The bottom number goes on the outside. Okay? So now I have the problem that Dominic was telling us. So Dominic, first step would be 12 goes into 13. How many times? 1. 1 times 12 is 12. I'm sorry, I have 1 left over. What does that 1 become?
1, 12.
It does. It does not become my little remainder anymore, but it becomes my numerator, and then the 12 still stays the same. So 13 over 12 becomes 1 and 1/12 as my final answer. Okay? Yeah. So that's adding fractions. Okay? Now, the only thing extra that I want to kind of talk to you about slightly is, I'm going to jump over here to this work page real quick. So what happens if we take that same exact problem? Okay, so what was it? 2, 6 plus what?
2, 6 plus 3, 4.
3/4? Okay. What if we take this exact problem? Is there anybody in the crowd who, like, when we were told to find the least common denominator, you saw 24? All right. Will 24 work?
Yeah.
Yes. 24 will work. Because 24 is a multiple of 6, and it's also a multiple of 4. Okay? So it will work. Is it the smallest one that they have in common?
No.
No.
I just saw that.
But you're just going to have to do an extra step. So I want to work it this way so that I can show you all that no matter what you start with, as long as you start with a number that is a multiple of the denominators you see, you'll end up with the same answer. Okay? So for those people that saw 24, they started building new fractions with the 24. Okay? 24 divided by 6 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 24 divided by 4 is 6 times 3 is 18. Okay? And now it's just adding time. So what's 8 plus 18? 26, my bad, over 24. Okay? But 26 over 24 is what kind of fraction again? Improper. So now I have to divide this, right? Okay? 24 goes into 26. One time. What am I left with? 2. I get 2 over 24. And so here's where things change. Now, instead of being done like I was when I chose 12 earlier, now because I didn't choose the smallest one to start with, Now I have to simplify it. So if you don't like simplifying fractions, you need to make sure that you use the least common denominator from the start. Okay? So 2 and 24. I've got to simplify that because what should be going off in your brain is this like warning sign, like 2 and 24 have some stuff in common. There is a number that I could divide into 2 and also divide into 24 that would put this fraction as low as it can go. Cassidy, what number would that be? Not a 12. You're thinking multiples again. Because I can't do 2 divided by 12, could I? It would be what? You have to think, what can I divide into both of these? I have to think of a number. So like think of it this way. Here's your little brain bubble for 2. What numbers can I multiply to get 2? Well, just 2 times 1, right? So think of your little brain bubble for 24. What could I multiply to get 24 that would be a common number with the 2? Well, 2 times 12, right? So what's the number that's the same in both brain bubbles? So 2 is the number that I would divide each of these by. What's 2 divided by 2? 1, which is the leftover number in my brain bubble. And then what's 24 divided by 2? Which is the other number in my brain bubble. So the answer still becomes 1 and 1/12. But it took you longer to get there, didn't it?
I just saw 24
So-
first, but then I just split in half.
Yeah, but I just wanted to share that with you because I don't want you to think that it's impossible to get the right answer if you don't pick the least common denominator. I mean, you can get there, you just may have to do more work before you get to the finish line, okay? So, the only way we get better at this is by trying and practicing some. So I'm gonna bring people to the board. We're not gonna work in competition. We're not gonna rush. We're gonna do one more together, and then I'm gonna have people come to this board, so I'll probably get about 5 of you at a time. Everybody's gonna get the same problem, okay? Because I'm gonna look for the work. I don't really care about the answer. I care about the work that got to the answer. But I will tell you, make sure that you simplify your fraction at the end. Because on your test yesterday, some of you got points taken off because you left a fraction not simplified. And you always have to simplify fractions, okay? So let's try one more example. And that example is going to be, let me grab it from my book. You all write this in your notes. Let's do this example, okay? All right, so I want you to try 3/10 plus 1/2. Okay, work to figure that answer out. So use those steps if you need to help you through the problem. And remember, least common denominator means you're searching for a multiple that 10 and 2 have in common. And the easiest route would be choosing the smallest one. When you have it, raise your hand and I'll come around and see.
Wait, we
You tell me if I can, remember multiples is when they double. Huh? Yeah, so yes, it was. What's the least common denominator we should be using, people? 10. We should be using 10. So you're building your fractions using 10. You didn't need to go that far. Well, don't waste time doing that. You're taking the time. Beautiful. You ever reach the finish line? This is an even number and that's an even number, which means something is in its simplest form. When you have it, raise it and I'll see. Beautiful. Yes, perfect. Yes, perfect. Excellent. Let me see. Yeah, nice. Y'all are killing this. What's your new denominator? Least common denominator that we all just said a minute ago is 10. So you need to start building your fractions with a 10. Okay, follow those steps, Brennan. What'd you get? Excellent. You're gonna reach the finish line. They're both even numbers, which means they have a digit in common. Yes, perfect. Where are you guys? That's not improper, that's a proper fraction. So you don't wanna do division with that, you wanna look for a common factor. So what's a number that you can divide into 8 and also divide into 10? 2. So you're gonna split 8 divided by 2. Yeah, and then 2 10 divided by 2. Yeah, only flip it if the big number's at the top, okay? Let's see. Yes, good. Where you at? Check your neighbor, compare with your neighbor, see if you both got the same thing. You skipped step 3. Okay? You know someone a little more organized, okay? Look at his. Look how simple and like organized his notes are. That's a big deal. That's why if I go to Kroger, they don't just have food like thrown all over the place. They need to organize so that I can find it, okay? So step 1, find the LCD, which we did. Step 2, we divided. 10 divided by 2 is what? So that 5 should be up here. Shouldn't be down there. Put it up here where I put it. When I saw this. Okay, same thing over here. 10 divided by 10 is what? 3. Okay, so now step 3, multiply that number to the numerator to get you the numerator. And this 3 times 1 is what? So then your 3 should go there. And when we go ahead, we just take the 10 times 5 times 1 is, and that one didn't change, it stayed the same. So now 3 plus 5 is, so this should be an 8. 6. So let's take it. Good. Now 8 and 10, try that simplifying. Now let's change the digits. What do they share? What do they have in common? Yes. Excellent. Good. The only thing we do is take step 1. Okay. So don't forget that step. Carry it over. All right. What do we get, people? 4 over 5. You should have got 4 over 5. So, okay. Look, some of you skipped step 3 also. All right. Watch. Step 1, find the least common denominator, which we did, right? Step 2 said to then divide your denominator. So when I divided this, I got a 1. So that 1 you should put up here.
I did that.
Okay? 10 divided by 10 is? 5. That 5 goes up here. What does step 3 say to do, Brennan?
Times that number to numerator.
Yeah. So what is 1 times 3? Okay. What is 5 times 1?
5.
Okay. So did you get that?
Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's see where the mistake happened. Hang on. I got to erase the mark I put here. All right. So then 3 plus 5 is what? 8. And your denominator stays the same, right? But is 8 over 10 an improper fraction? Remember, we only flip it on its side when the big number's at the top. Is the big number at the top in this example? No. So to simplify this, we're going to use our brain bubbles. Okay, so here we're going to think of all the things that I can multiply to give me 8. And I know I can do a 2 times a 4. Is there anything else? Well, but 1, we don't really need to put 1 in our brain bubble. Let's come down here and 10. What can I use to get 10? 2 times 5. Okay. What's the digit they have in common? 2. So that's the one that I need to use to then simplify. Okay. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So there's where my outcome came. Okay. All right. So you weren't the only one that did that. I had a couple of other people who, when you got to 8 over 10, you turned that into a mixed number. Remember, if it's a proper fraction, like this one, we just simplify using like our little common number. But we only flip it if the big thing's at the top, okay? All right, so let's try some at the board. All right, so let me stop this video. So I'm gonna just tell the people at home so that they know, okay? You all don't know this just yet. But your homework tonight is, I'm gonna only make you work even problems, okay? So who's my homework helper this week? Addison, go on up and write it for us. We're gonna just do the even numbers, okay? So workbook page 93 and 94, evens only. Okay, that's what you have to work on. And it literally is exactly what we have been doing up here, okay?